For nearly 8 decades, a single currency has ruled the world. From the deserts of the Middle East to the ports of Asia, from the skyscrapers of New York to the markets of Nairobi, every trade, every loan, every barrel of oil has revolved around the dollar. But what happens when half the world decides it has had enough? What happens when the rising nations, the ones that feed the world, power the world, and manufacture the world's goods, decide to build a system of their own? That moment is no longer hypothetical. It is forming quietly, strategically, and with the weight of centuries of resentment behind it. It is called BRICS. And if their next move succeeds, the financial order you were born into, the global empire of the dollar, could fracture before your eyes. The story begins with a simple yet revolutionary idea. Power in the 21st century no longer belongs to those who control armies, but to those who control settlement systems. Every payment that crosses a border, every commodity exchanged, every loan written in digital ink. These invisible flows define empires. For decades, those flows ran through a single channel, the United States dollar. After the Second World War, the dollar became more than America's currency. It became the oxygen of global trade. Through the Bretton Woods system, international commerce was anchored to the dollar, and the dollar was anchored to gold. When that link was severed in 1971, the world did not turn away. It doubled down. The petrodollar system locked oil and commodities into dollar-based trade, ensuring that every nation needed dollars to function. It was a brilliant move, dominance disguised as stability. If you controlled the world's currency, you controlled the world's behavior. The United States could sanction, isolate, or reward any nation without firing a single bullet. Banks in London, Hong Kong, and Dubai all spoke the same language, green. But history does not allow monopolies to last forever. And as the United States printed money, borrowed heavily, and expanded its debt to keep the machine alive, other nations watched in silence. Nations that mined the minerals, drilled the oil, and built the factories, yet were forced to trade their lifeblood through someone else's currency. That resentment slowly became strategy. Strategy became BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. At first, BRICS was merely an acronym coined by a Goldman Sachs economist in the early 21st century. But the countries within it saw something deeper, a shared frustration. They were tired of a system where every decision, from International Monetary Fund loans to trade routes, was written in Washington. They wanted autonomy. They wanted leverage. They wanted a world where value was not dictated by someone else's keyboard. Over 2 decades, they began to build it. China became the world's factory. India became its software mind. Russia controlled energy. Brazil and South Africa held resources. Together, they grew into an economic bloc larger than the Group of 7 in purchasing power. Yet, their economies still depended on the Western financial system, the same system that punished anyone who defied it. When Russia was cut off from the global payment system in 2022, it was a wake-up call. If one nation could be unplugged from the global economy overnight, then no one was safe. The message to the rest of the world was unmistakable. Money is not neutral. It is a weapon. And BRICS decided they would rather build their own. Imagine this. A few years from now, at a BRICS summit in Shanghai, leaders step onto the stage to announce what they call a new financial architecture. Their vision is a digital currency backed not by promises, but by power. Real commodities, real energy, real labor. They unveil the BRICS Reserve Unit, a digital currency anchored to a basket of assets: gold, oil, rare earth minerals, and the currencies of member states. It is designed for trade settlement, not speculation. A parallel network entirely outside Western banking rails. No SWIFT. No Federal Reserve. No Wall Street middleman. A payment sent from Rio can reach Shanghai in seconds, settled through a BRICS blockchain system immune to sanctions or oversight. To the public, it sounds technical. To the markets, it sounds seismic. For the first time in modern history, there is a genuine alternative to the dollar's monopoly. At first, the West laughs it off. They call it symbolic, impractical, a gesture for headlines. But within months, something strange begins to happen. Saudi Arabia signs long-term oil contracts not in dollars, but in the BRICS currency. India pays for Russian energy through the new system. African nations use it to trade minerals with China. And suddenly, a portion of global trade, 10%, then 20%, begins to move off the dollar grid. That is when the tremors begin. Currency traders panic. The dollar slips, then trembles. United States Treasury yields rise as investors demand greater returns to hold American debt. Emerging economies begin diversifying their reserves, quietly reducing their dependence on the dollar. It does not collapse in a single moment. Empires never do. But like a massive ship slowly filling with water, the imbalance becomes visible. America can still print money, but now its inflation spreads across the world in unfamiliar ways. Sanctions lose their force. Financial dominance, once invisible, begins to fracture in plain view. And with every transaction that avoids the dollar, the illusion of permanence weakens. This is no longer only a financial story. It is a civilizational one. For centuries, global power drifted westward, from Rome to London to Washington. Now it begins to drift east, not through conquest, but through commerce, through the silent machinery of value exchange. China Belt and Road Initiative already binds Asia, Africa, and Europe through ports, railways, and data cables. Add a parallel financial system to that network and something unprecedented emerges. An empire without borders, enforced not by armies but by settlements. BRICS is not merely creating a currency. It is creating a new language of money, one spoken by the majority of humanity long excluded from the Western promise. For nations such as Indonesia, Iran, Nigeria, and Egypt, countries that view the Western system as exclusive and weaponized, this shift does not feel like rebellion. It feels like release. We often believe we have evolved beyond history, but perhaps we are only repeating it, this time in data rather than metal. Rome debased its silver. Today we digitize our currencies. The result may be the same, only faster. History does not repeat itself word for word. It echoes through patterns of power, trust, and money. And now we are living through a transformation so vast that future historians may speak of it as we speak of Rome collapse. The difference is that no legions march and no cities burn. Instead, lines of code replace coins of gold. This is the digital money revolution. Rome fall unfolding in real time. For thousands of years, money was never just paper or code. It was trust made tangible. Gold, silver, salt grain, objects valued because they were scarce. Rome understood this. Its economy rested on the denarius, a silver coin that carried not only value but confidence. When a Roman soldier held that coin, he trusted it the way modern people trust their bank balance. It was a promise backed by imperial authority, discipline, and stability. But empires always expand beyond what they can sustain. Armies grow, borders stretch, costs rise. And when taxes fail to keep pace, rulers reach for the same shortcut. They dilute the currency. Rome began melting its coins, mixing in cheaper metals while pretending nothing had changed. At first, no one noticed. Then everyone did. Trust fractured. Prices surged. Soldiers demanded higher pay. Trade slowed. The most powerful economy of its era had built its empire on metal, and that metal was losing its integrity. Money lost meaning, and Rome began decaying from within. Centuries later, humanity replaced silver with paper, notes backed by gold stored in distant vaults. Yet the game remained unchanged. Every empire, from Spanish silver fleets to British sterling, learned the same dangerous lesson: printing more promises than can be honored. In 1971, the United States formalized it. President Nixon ended the dollar convertibility to gold. That night, tangible money vanished and faith-based currency took its place. For the first time in history, the entire global economy operated not on substance but on belief alone. Governments gained the power to print, borrow, and spend without restraint. Central banks became the new emperors, creating wealth not through metal but through keystrokes. For decades, the system appeared to work. Or at least it appeared stable. But illusions of endless prosperity always fracture. They fractured in Rome. They fractured in Weimar. And now they fracture again. This time not in coins or paper, but in code. Money has always evolved alongside power. When Europe shifted from kings to parliaments, gold coins gave way to state-issued notes. When industry rose, banks became national engines. Now, as data becomes the new frontier, money becomes fully digital, detached from physical reality. We have entered a new era, the digital empire. Money no longer rattles in pockets or folds into wallets. It flickers on screens, existing as data, invisible and instant. Every payment, every trade, every debt now flows through a vast digital web. It feels modern, efficient, and secure. But beneath the glow of our screens, the same ancient danger returns. Dependence on trust defines everything. We trust banks to hold value. We trust governments to preserve it. We trust algorithms to defend it. And almost no one stops to ask what happens when that trust breaks. Rome relied on silver. We rely on code. Both were treated as unbreakable. Both were only as strong as belief allowed them to be. When the pandemic struck in the year 2020, the world entered a crisis that tested every structure at once: political, medical, and financial. Factories shut down. Borders froze. Entire economies paused in a single moment. And what did leaders do in response? They created money, trillions of units produced with a few keystrokes. It took Rome centuries to destroy its currency. We did it digitally in months. Governments called it stimulus. Central banks called it stability. But the truth was simpler. We were printing belief, not creating wealth. Inflation followed. First denied, then redefined, then quietly accepted. But inflation is not merely higher prices. It is shrinking value. The silent erosion of purchasing power that punishes savers and rewards debtors. It is the tax no one votes for and the tax that never disappears. For ordinary people, the outcome was unmistakable. Food became more expensive. Housing drifted further out of reach. Savings lost strength year after year, and while politicians argued publicly, the underlying reality remained unchanged. Every empire in history has followed the same path. When overwhelmed by debt, they do not default in name, they default in value. The rise of BRICS does not automatically signal the fall of the West. It signals balance and possibly accountability. A new system does not promise fairness, but it guarantees movement. And movement is the one thing entrenched orders struggle to contain. For centuries, money has been a shared story, a collective agreement to believe. The dollar story was written in the aftermath of war. The BRICS story is being written in the shadow of inequality. The next chapter, whether stable or unstable, depends on what humanity learns from both. Empires fall the same way currencies decay. Slowly, at first, then suddenly. And perhaps the real collapse is not financial. Perhaps it is philosophical. The realization that no empire, no currency, and no promise lasts forever. The day BRICS introduces its system will not feel explosive. It will feel subtle. Screens updating, charts shifting, quiet recalibrations. People will still use cards, still buy coffee, still check balances. But something fundamental will have changed. The empire of paper will give way to the empire of code. And history will remember this moment the way we remember the year 1971. As the point when money changed meaning, because the dollar never ruled through force. It ruled through trust. And trust is the most fragile empire of all. If BRICS creates a system people believe in more, one that feels fairer, freer, or simply newer, then the transfer will not come through revolution but through transaction. The world will not explode. It will exhale. The future of money is not American, Chinese, or Russian. It is multipolar, digital, and unavoidable. The question is not whether BRICS will rise. The question is whether society is prepared when it does. Because the next financial revolution will not arrive in violence. It will arrive in code, quietly, efficiently. And like every great transformation before it, most people will not realize it has happened until it already has. The answers are not hidden in the future.